初めて言語を学ぶ際の3つのヒント。1番、ネイティブ言語で馴染みのあるコンテンツを利用する。または興味を持っているもので始める。例えば映画です。マーベル映画やディズニー映画は通常多くの翻訳がある。そして子供の頃に見た番組も使えます。私の場合、ポケモンやスポンジボブをよく見ました。それとメインストリームなアニメ、例えばドラゴンボールも。これが難しいかもしれません。もしあなたの目標の言語が珍しい場合、でもその場合は好きなものを見つけてください。趣味など。じゃあ既存の知識と興味を活用することはモチベーションがあり、言語に対し自信を早く作ることができます。新しい言語に入り込むのは難しい。なので、面白いトピックを始めることが重要です。そして、馴染みのあるコンテンツを見ることは、新しい言葉や新しいフレーズの理解を迅速に助けます。例えば、スポンジボブ。スポンジボブの文に聞いて、クラビーパティという文が分かっている場合、カニという言葉を素早くつかめることができます。何を探すかを知っているからです。じゃあ、おすすめします。繰り返しは重要です。同じコンテンツを何度も見ることで、理解と記憶が大幅に向上します。2番、短い定期的な言語練習を開始する。徐々に時間を延ばして着実に上達してください。言語や一般的なスキルは毎日の一貫した練習が最も効果的です。その理由は、学習は休息時に行われるためです。したがって、このサイクルを頻繁に繰り返すと、迅速にそして着実に成長します。例えば、Let's use Pokemon。チコリータは月曜日、水曜日、金曜日に長時間勉強します。でもカエルは毎日少しずつ勉強する。カエルはより早く学びます。それでもチコリータの週の勉強時間がもっと多くても。私の場合、初めにたったの10分から始めました。それだけ。じゃあ、主な目標に合わせて練習を行ってください。例えば、理解と会話を身につけたいのであれば、練習のほとんど聞くことと声に出すことに集中してください。3番、自分の圧迫しないで単にシステムを構築してください。多く言語学習は無意識的に行われるため、そのプロセスが徐々に進むのを自然に任せてください。私の場合、長い間混乱していました。実際にはなぜそれらをしているのかを理解せずに、はっきりと文を話すことができました。結局、あなたの脳は意識的うまく説明できないパターンを解決していきます。じゃあ、ネイティブレベルにはトークを呼びませんが、言語に対してのコツは、私は自然と考えすぎる傾向があるため、目標に対して本当に役立ちました。じゃあ、全部シンプルに進めて楽しんでください。じゃあ、ラベルや用語に巻かないでください。流暢、 上級、中級など、これらの肩書きは実際には重要ではない。また、アクセントについてあまり心配しないで。これらのことに気にすると、ためらおって進まなくなります。単に言語の学習を楽しんでくださいね。I want to say this part in English to really get it across, but as you'll notice with a lot of my content, I like to focus on mental health and forming good connections with the things that you do. So do not make yourself feel guilty for not achieving a certain status with something. This really goes for language learning or any type of self-improvement. To explain why I stress this, I worked in Japan for a while, completely in Japanese, and I had an amazing time communicating with my clients and coworkers and people I met all throughout Tokyo, friends, all that. However, I used to come across people who worried too much about the unimportant things, to the point where they could not really have regular conversations with people in Japan. Or they couldn't really watch content without the use of subtitles. And this was despite them being able to pass some test. Because test-taking skills and real-life skills are usually two totally different things. But I'll get into that later. Overall, the experience is just far better than I can really explain. As far as learning a language, the interactions, the good opportunities, it's just so much I can go on about, and maybe I will in future videos. That being said, I don't have the best accent. I don't have the best cadence. I don't have the best grammar, vocab, anything. But none of that truly matters, I promise you. So I really want to stress this point. Don't let the perfectionism hold you back. This was a struggle for me in a lot of areas for years. Not just language, but a lot of other things. You know, my music, I never really put it out there because I thought it had to be perfect. And just things in general, you know, you want to just send it. It's a skill you have to build up, but just send it. So that's just something I wanted to give you a heads up on. As far as grammar and vocab and those kind of things go, because I know I'm going to get this question a lot. It's okay to learn the basics, but don't spend a lot of time there. You should really focus on learning natural sentences, or at least getting a structure down so you can fill in the blanks with words later. And get focused on your main goals in the language. But again, don't overstress it. If you notice by the way I talk pretty formal in these videos, but that's because I learned Japanese for business purposes. I can talk casual now, and you know, I can mingle when it's time, but for the most part, whenever I'm speaking Japanese, I'm pretty much giving directions in some sort of business setting. So that's why I speak the way I do. You may see people online who stress about things such as grammar and accent and those kind of things, but usually these are people who really cannot even communicate in the language. I saw this for years while I was living in Japan, which I'll be moving back soon, by the way. So learn and experiment. And if you come across someone who's trying to tell you you're not good enough in the comments or whatever you post or whoever you talk to, just tell them,
we do not care.
Soon I'll start to explain how to start thinking in your target language, as well as the next steps to learn, such as practical subjects and conversation topics. Because I think it's really important to learn the most frequent topics and then move on to specifics. But before all that, I really just want you to build a good relationship with the language. I like to say it like this. Imagine something you do now that takes you a little bit of effort. but try to remember the first time you started learning it. In my case, I always think back to when I was learning how to do handstands. And at first, as a heavier guy, I'm like, this is kind of hard. How am I supposed to hold up this much weight? And, eventually with practice, it's seemingly effortless now. I don't have to think about balancing. I'm more than strong enough to do it. And it's really not even a thought. So try to make that correlation in your own life, because this really goes a long way when it applies to learning a language. And I would say write it down, if you will. This is something that I use in my daily life. In fact, on my piano here, I have a card that reads, "Someday you'll play piano the same way you play guitar." So try to make that correlation in your own life. I cannot stress how much that really helps. And last note, consistency. So earlier I brought up the example of Chikorita and Dragonite and their study habits. But sometimes you're going to switch between the two. Some weeks you'll be Chikorita, some weeks you'll be Dragonite, some weeks you're going to be Snorlax, and you're not going to do anything. But that's totally okay. I was the same way. I was a little bit inconsistent starting out, which is why I quickly got to a very low starting point. Like I said, 10 minutes a day was my goal. And if I went over that, it was just extra credit. But it's totally normal, This is a lifelong skill, so do not stress over when you're going to get there and how long it's going to take. Just imagine you doing this for the rest of your life, because you will. I promise you will. I still remember when I thought it was impossible for me to learn Japanese, because I was in my late 20s when I really got into it. But eventually it worked itself out, And if you're watching anime and movies with no subtitles, it's such a good feeling. Not as a flex per se, but it's something that's hard. And when you can finally do it with almost no effort, it's really satisfying. So I really stress my approach because I feel it's the most realistic, or one of the most realistic. Maybe I'm not correct on everything, but it worked for me, and I'm pretty sure it will work for you. I also have friends in Japan who are American who also speak Japanese and understand it just as good as me. So try to take this approach to heart. And if I can do it, honestly, I really think anyone can do it. I'm not some superhuman guy. I just kind of figured some things out. And make sure you come back and watch this video over and over again. Not for my sake, but for you. It's easy to get discouraged when you're learning a new language or learning new anything. It's hard. There's times where you feel confused. There's times where you feel like you'll never be able to speak it. Come back and watch this video. I'll be doing a lot of my future videos in Japanese as well to continue the trend. And also because I think it's just good for you to see someone doing it. Even if the topics are not about Japanese, I may just speak it in Japanese just to do it. But anyways, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. It's right there. Just click it. It only takes a couple seconds. And if you don't, I'm going to send that little red thing from Super Mario 64 to throw you around until you finally like and subscribe. And if you want to know more about this channel and myself, you can click this video on the right. And if you want to learn how to use social media and YouTube to leverage your productivity in a means to not give it up completely, you can click this video on the left. And I'll see you in the next one.